Something strange may have happened at the very end of Descendants, Wicked Wonderland, and if you noticed it, you might already have an idea about where the story could be heading next. For just a few seconds, the movie showed Pink holding a mysterious glowing object. There was no explanation, no dramatic reveal, and no character telling us what it was. The story simply moved on. But in a franchise where tiny details can become major clues later, that moment feels impossible to ignore. And now, when you connect that object with Chessie's strange reaction, the Queen of Hearts' unexpected behavior, the growing possibility of Neverland, and the darker character theories surrounding Pink, a much bigger picture starts to emerge. Could Disney actually be preparing its darkest Descendants story yet? Let's start with Pink, because that final scene may have completely changed her future. Throughout Wicked Wonderland, Pink is still discovering where she belongs in this new version of the world, but the object she finds could be connected to the same magical force responsible for the timeline crisis. If that is true, Pink may have unknowingly taken possession of something far more powerful than she realizes. The most interesting part is that Pink doesn't seem scared of it at all. She treats it like an ordinary treasure, while Chessie appears to understand exactly what Pink has discovered. That raises a huge question. What if Chessie isn't simply watching Pink, but waiting for her to activate something? And this could connect directly to one of the biggest theories about Pink's future. What if she actually becomes evil? That would completely change the formula of the franchise. Instead of having a clear villain that everyone knows to fear, the next movie could follow a character who slowly becomes the villain without even realizing it. Pink could genuinely believe that she is protecting her friends or fixing a problem, while the mysterious power gradually changes her decisions. By the time everyone understands what is happening, Pink could already be too far gone. That would make her transformation much more emotional, because the audience would understand the reasons behind every wrong choice. Then there is the Queen of Hearts. One tiny moment in Wicked Wonderland may have been presented as comedy, but it could have a much darker meaning. When she suddenly says, "Off with his head," we briefly see the old Queen of Hearts again. Her expression changes, her voice becomes sharper, and for a moment it feels like the previous version of her is still hiding underneath the reformed character. So what if changing the timeline didn't actually erase those darker instincts? What if it only buried them? If the next movie explores that idea, then the heroes may discover that changing someone's past does not necessarily change who they truly are. That would create a much bigger problem because every character affected by the altered timeline could potentially have pieces of their original personality still trapped inside them. The heroes might believe they have fixed everything, while the darkness is simply waiting for the right moment to return. Suddenly, characters who were once completely trustworthy could become unpredictable, and the line between hero and villain would become much harder to understand. And then we have Neverland. The possibility of Neverland becoming the next major setting is especially interesting because it would open an entirely new part of the Descendants universe. Hazel Hook has a direct connection to Captain Hook, and bringing her to Neverland could finally give the story a chance to explore that relationship. But Neverland might not only be Hazel's story. It could become the place where several unanswered family mysteries finally connect. If the next movie begins introducing missing parents and revealing secrets from the older generation, Neverland could become much more important than anyone expects. Imagine a story where the older generation is forced to confront the consequences of their past, while their children are trying to repair problems they never created. The parents have secrets, the children have their own conflicts, and everyone is connected to a timeline that has already been changed once. That could create a completely different type of Descendants movie. It would no longer be simply heroes versus villains. It would be parents versus children, past versus future, and perhaps even one generation against another. Now imagine the trailer for that movie. It could begin with a dark forest, the sound of waves, and an abandoned pirate ship sitting near an unfamiliar island. We see Hazel standing alone as she looks toward the ocean. Then a mysterious voice says, "Your father has been waiting for you." The screen cuts to black. We return to Wonderland, where Pink opens the mysterious box. The glowing object begins moving by itself. Chessie watches from the shadows, and suddenly the entire screen flashes white before the title appears, Descendants 6. But the biggest reveal could involve Red's own family history. Fans have continued to wonder about the characters' missing parents and how those relationships might affect their identities. If the next movie finally reveals the truth about Red's father, that could completely change how we understand her character. Maybe her connection to Wonderland was never accidental. Maybe her family history explains why she was always connected to certain kinds of magic. And perhaps Pink's mystery is connected to the same larger story. What initially looked like separate character arcs could actually be pieces of one enormous mystery. There is also the possibility that Descendants 6 could finally bring the original generation and the newer generation together. The first movies created the foundation, while the newer stories expanded the universe. The next chapter could potentially connect both eras into one story. Imagine characters from both generations facing the same threat, with the older characters forced to confront decisions they made years ago while the younger characters deal with consequences they never created. Neither side would have all the answers, and that could create some of the most emotional conflicts the franchise has ever seen. Of course, there is still the question of Maddox Hatter. His story may not be completely finished. If he survived the events of Wicked Wonderland, he could return with a new purpose. Maybe he no longer wants revenge. Maybe he wants the mysterious object Pink discovered. And maybe he knows something about that object that everyone else has forgotten. If that happens, Maddox could become even more dangerous than before, because he wouldn't necessarily need to destroy Wonderland. He might only need to control the power connected to the timeline. And if Pink already possesses that power, she could unknowingly be standing at the center of the next major conflict. That's what makes the ending so interesting. None of these possibilities have been officially confirmed, but the clues leave plenty of room for speculation. The glowing object, Chessie's reaction, the Queen of Hearts' sudden return to her old personality, the possibility of Neverland, the mysteries surrounding the parents, and the potential connection between the old and new generations all point toward a story that could be much bigger than another simple adventure. So the real question is what Disney plans to do with all of these unanswered pieces. Could Pink really become the next major villain? Is the glowing object connected to the pocket watch, or is it something even older and more powerful? Will Neverland become the next major setting, and could Captain Hook finally become an important part of the story? And most importantly, could Descendants 6 finally reveal the secrets surrounding Red and Pink's families? Until Disney officially reveals more, everything remains theory. But if even some of these ideas are correct, the next chapter could completely change the direction of the franchise. So tell me what you think in the comments. What do you believe Pink actually found? Do you think she is destined to become the next villain, or could she become the hero who saves everyone from the power she accidentally discovered? Let me know your theories, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe because the moment new Descendants details arrive, we'll be breaking down every clue.